Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Yitro, Tavshin Pei Vav, and we'll do a couple of items. It's not going to be one long discussion. It'll be a couple of items. We'll see how far we get. Okay, so we'll start from the beginning of the parsha, which is Parak Ches Pasuk Aleph. We have Yisro coming and meeting the Jewish people in the desert. And Yisro comes and brings back Moshe's wife and his children. Moshe tells Yisro all about the miracles that they experienced. And then the next day, it says that Yisro saw that Moshe was sitting to judge the people, and they stood waiting for Moshe from morning until evening. Yisro says to Moshe, this is not something sustainable. You're going to wear out. The people are going to wear out. And therefore, you need to create a court system. And Moshe listens, and he creates a court system. Now, there is discussion about what was Moshe thinking to begin with. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to understand, that this is not really a great idea. How can you just have people waiting like that a whole day, a whole day like that? It's going to wear Moshe out. It's going to wear out the people. It seems pretty obvious that that's the way to go. And there are commentaries that talk about, why Moshe thought originally this is the way it should be. It's also very interesting to note, I'm just going to mention it, that in Parshas Devarim, when again Moshe talks about appointing judges, there was not even mention about Yisro there. Moshe says, it's too much, I can't do it by myself, and therefore he appointed judges. So at the end of the day, there's something here about the fact that, it's really a very tiring and it can really wear you down. And therefore Moshe needed to go ahead and appoint other judges. So again, like I said, there are the commentaries that talk about what Moshe thought to begin with. But it still comes across, when you read the parsha and you read what happened here, it seems that Yisro's suggestion was something very obvious. And why didn't Moshe realize it? Why didn't the Jewish people realize it?
Why nobody else?
Yeah, right. Why did nobody else bring it up? And even and I'm saying this in introduction because I'm going to share with you a thought from the Orach Chaim. And the Orach Chaim says that he has a question. Clearly, Yisro deserved honor. Yisro honored Moshe. He took care of Moshe. And therefore, the Orach Chaim says Yisro was clearly deserving of honor himself. But why did the honor have to come basically at the expense of making the Jewish people look not so good? Because there was other ways of giving honor to Yisro, not the one who has to, give the idea of courts. And as the wording of the Orach Chaim is, Lo b'derech zeh shorech chas v'sholom k'pachus yediyah b'am Hashem. And not in a way that looks like something very lacking on the part of the Jewish people's understanding of how to do things, until they needed, somebody from a foreigner from a different country to come and point this out to them. So I do believe that Orach Chaim is not ignoring the fact that there was something about Moshe's reasoning for why he did it this way. And I think even the Orach Chaim has a discussion, the explanation of, Yisro says, Moshe, what are you doing? Moshe answers. So Moshe had an explanation what he was doing. But at the end of the day, as we say, it's a bad look. It's a bad look that something so obvious the Jewish people seem to miss out on. And if you're going to say, well, this was Yisro's chance to be honored, to be rewarded for the way he honored Moshe when Moshe was a refuge, was running away, says the Orach Chaim, there are other ways for Hashem to pay him back. Why does it have to be in a situation where it looks like the Jewish people really missed out on something obvious? So he says a very interesting answer. And his answer is that what Hashem wants to show the Jewish people in that generation and all generations, that, do you know why Hashem gave us the Torah? Not because we're the smartest. We're not the smartest. There are other people that are very smart. Look at Yisro. He came up with this idea that we didn't realize. He came up with this great idea that we didn't realize. that's a lesson to us, like to think that it's a lesson to us to realize we weren't chosen to give the Torah because we're the smartest or the most talented or the most creative. Because in this case, it was quite obvious when the Jewish people at this point, they kind of missed something that was pretty obvious. And again, even if you say there were reasons for it, again, it really looks like we missed out on something here. When you just read the story, it really looks like we missed out. And the point of the story, the way of portraying the answer is that the reason why the Torah is saying it this way, giving it this way, in the sense that here is Yitro coming with an obvious, with a pretty basic idea that we missed, is in order to teach that generation, all generations, that we did not receive the Torah because we're the smartest. Because look, you have Yitro, he's from a different country. He didn't even convert yet at this point of time. And he came up with a very strong, good idea that we missed out on. The point is, we didn't get the Torah because we're the smartest. We got the Torah because we are the descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That is why Hashem promised Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that their descendants will be the Jewish people. And as I've seen this idea brought down, the Ohr HaChaim doesn't say it outright, but I've seen it brought down. And as descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, spiritually, we have something, we're spiritually unique to be able to receive the Torah, because we're descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that's why we have the Torah.
But there is nobody who wants it.
That is true. That is true. You're asking from the fact that the others were asked. Yeah, but others were asked not necessarily. When it's an interesting point. I believe that when the Torah was offered to other nations, it wasn't going to exclude the Jewish people. The Jewish people were going to get it too. Yeah. Question is, will the other nations also have it? But the Jewish nation was for sure going to get it. And again, they were asked and they chose it. And they agreed to it. And at the same time, Hashem choosing us, we say Hashem bachar banu, right? Hashem chose us. Our chosenness was not because we're the smartest. Our chosenness was because of the fact that we were and are descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And therefore, that's why this whole story with Yisro is brought in the Torah in a way that, again, we see here that Yisro was the one who brought up this idea that really seemed to be something that we should have realized. It happened this way. Hashem orchestrated this way to teach us that we didn't get the Torah because we're the smartest, but we got the Torah because of our legacy of being descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. There's an interesting discussion about the fact that, so Arkady, your question about, nobody else wanted it and we said yes, is a very general question. Yeah. When we say, when we say the brachas over the Torah, when we make the brachas over the Torah, what do we say? Asher bachar banu mikol amim. What do you mean? Everybody else said no, and we said yes. What does that mean? He chose us. So that's a general question. But we know there is this, but there is, as we say, Asher bachar banu, who chose us, and that idea again here is that we weren't chosen because we're the smartest and most talented, but rather because we are the descendants, the spiritual heirs of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now, the Ohr HaChaim adds that there is discussion in the Gemara, in the Talmud. In the Torah, we have this story of Yisro preceding the giving of the Torah. That's how we have it in the Parsha. We have the story of Yisro, the judge appointing judges, and then the giving of the Torah, which would imply that when did Yisro come? Before the giving of the Torah. But there's actually an argument in the Talmud. When did he come? Did he come before or after? So the Ohr HaChaim says that his idea that this is a lesson to teach us about, why we receive the Torah works much better if we say that Yisro came before. But it could also be a lesson if Yisro came afterwards. It's still the same lesson. But it works better, he says, if it actually Yisro came before the giving of the Torah, his idea came before the giving of the Torah, and therefore it was before we received the Torah that we received this lesson of why that we didn't receive the Torah because we're the smartest, but received the Torah because we are descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, now
this is just unique person who make some.
Yeah, I mean,
there's nobody else in Torah.
What do you mean?
To support the idea we are not smarter.
When's enough? When's enough? When's enough?
Yeah.
But that wasn't what he wasn't coming to do that. It's just that's what happened here.
Yeah.
Now, what's also interesting is, when I think about this idea, and I don't know if it's such a question, but I don't want to sound too arrogant, but, Jewish people generally are, pretty smart.
No, this is fact.
Pretty smart, and so it's interesting. But again, it doesn't mean we're the smartest, and it doesn't mean that we receive the Torah because we're the smartest. Because look, here's somebody else, not even one of us, really a complete outsider, and he is the one who focused us in on what we need to do. There's something to that. And therefore, there is the lesson there that teaches us that that's why we didn't receive the Torah because of that, but because of the fact that we are the descendants, the heirs of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, now the Torah continues and then starts talking about the giving of the Torah. Now, if we take a look, Perek Yutes, chapter 19, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Okay. B'chodesh hashalishi, in the third month, let's say Bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, of the Jewish people leaving the land of Egypt. B'yom hazeh, on this day, bo midbar Sinai, they came to the Sinai desert. Vayisu me'Refidim, they traveled from Refidim. Vayavo'u midbar Sinai, and they came to the Sinai desert. Vayachanu ba'midbar, they encamped in the desert. Vayichas sham Yisrael neged Har, and Yisrael encamped there opposite the mountain. Now, there's a couple of extra things here in the parsha, in these psukim. I mean, the first pasuk says they came to Midbar Sinai, and then the next pasuk again says they came to Midbar Sinai. Why does it say it twice? I'm just pointing out that question because we're not going to focus on that tonight, but I want to point it out because the other question that we are going to focus on is that at the beginning of pasuk Beis, verse 2, it says Vayisu me'Refidim, and they traveled from Refidim. Now, here there is a question, and this is really a question that the Midrash asks, that if you look in Parshas Beshalach last week, the end of the Parsha, of last week's Parsha, Beshalach, it says there the Jewish people are in Refidim. That whole story, the whole episode of Amalek, fighting war with Amalek in the desert, the Torah says they were in Refidim when that happened. So if the Torah were to say they came to the Sinai desert, then we would know that where did they travel from? Refidim. So why does the Torah here have to again tell us, Vayisim or Refidim, they traveled from Refidim, Vayavoyim midbar Sinai, they came to the Sinai desert? Why do you need to repeat it? And what's the point of even having to know it? That they traveled from Refidim. So the Medrash says like this. The Medrash the Mechilta, and I'm working with how the commentary of Hamakdavar cites this Medrash. Rashi cites it also in a little bit of a different wording. But the way the Medrash called the Mechilta says is that the purpose of saying Vayisim Refidim, they traveled from Refidim, was Ma bi Atzal Midbar Sinai Amanas Lakabel Torah, just as they came to the Sinai desert, meaning when they came to the Sinai desert, they came knowing with the intent to receive the Torah. Kach nisi asem Refidim al das Lakabel Torah. So too, when they left Refidim, it was with the thought and the intention of receiving the Torah. Meaning, when they came to the Sinai desert, they knew this is where they're going to receive the Torah. But by adding and saying, and they traveled from Refidim, and they came to Midbar Sinai, putting it together is teaching us that just like when they came to Sinai, they came with the intention of receiving the Torah. When they left Refidim, they already were focused on receiving the Torah. That's why the Torah repeats, and they traveled from Refidim. To tell us that leaving Refidim was the same as coming to Sinai. Just like they came to Sinai to receive the Torah. When they left Refidim with the thoughts and the intention and the focus on receiving the Torah. Okay, what's the point of that? Why is that so important to know when they left Refidim, that they left Refidim already with the focus on receiving the Torah? Well, why is that important to know? So the Netziv explains that what's being taught here is a lesson that when we have, let's say, when we want to have a spiritual experience, when we want to have an experience of Kedusha, of sanctity, so we really should be preparing ourselves for it. We really should be getting our minds and our thoughts into experiencing that experience. Don't just like run into it. It's something that you should prepare yourself for. You should think about it. You should be focused on it. You should be maybe even excited about it. But before you experience something, before you have a spiritual experience, there should be a preparation for it, a way that you get yourself ready so that you can really experience it. If you just run into something, you don't experience it much as if you've already kind of, focused yourself in on it beforehand. And the more that you prepare beforehand, the more you will take out of the experience. When the Jewish people came to Mount Sinai, right, they didn't receive the Torah the next second. They were there for a couple of days. And they had 3 days of preparation at that point of time. But what the Medrash is telling us is that when they left Refidim, when they were on their way to Sinai, they were already preparing for receiving the Torah then. Were they doing the same preparation as when they came to Sinai? No. But they were already thinking about it. They were already contemplating about it. They were already, in some ways, we could even say excited about it. Imagine you're going to a wedding, right? So when you leave the house, go to the wedding, you're already excited about it. If you're excited about going to the wedding, you're excited about it already beforehand. And when the excitement starts early, when you actually experience the exciting event, you get even more excited because you already were working yourself into it. The Jewish people, when they were leaving Refidim, already with the focus on receiving the Torah. They were already excited about it. They were thinking about it. They were focused on it. And that itself is preparation for it. And the Medrash is telling us, the Torah is teaching us, the more preparation you put into a spiritual experience, the more you'll have from it. It's not just like you come to experience, you have it. To really experience it, to appreciate it, to experience it, there's a preparation, a mental preparation, an emotional preparation. And the more you prepare, the more you will take out of the experience. Because the Jewish people already started from Refidim. When they left Refidim to go to Sinai, they're already thinking about receiving the Torah. They left to receive the Torah. They already were focused on it. That already was an early preparation for receiving the Torah. And that made their experience receiving the Torah even greater. Because the more preparation you put into something, the more you take out from it. And the Netziv brings this point out with a famous story in the Gemara, from the Gemara in Bava Metzia. I mentioned this story many times before, but the story goes like this. There was a sage named Reb Chia, and Reb Chia realized that there was a problem. There was a Jewish education problem amongst the Jewish people. There were many children who didn't have fathers to teach them Torah. They didn't have necessarily a set up school system. If you had a father to teach you Torah, you learned Torah. And then eventually, if you excelled, you went on to the higher academy. But the starting point was, if you had a father to teach you Torah, you learned Torah. You didn't have a father, you didn't learn Torah. And that was a problem. So Reb Chia, on his own, went out to take care of that problem. So what did he do? So the idea that Reb Chia had was, he was going to go from town to town. He was going to teach the 5 books of the Torah to 5 children, the 6 books of the Mishnah to 6 children, Each one would become fluent in a book, and then they would teach each other what they were fluent in. And because of that, you had all these children who got their basic knowledge of Torah. And the Gemara praised Reb Chia greatly for this. Now, Reb Chia, so what's interesting is Reb Chia did not go to the local bookstore and buy 5 Chumashim and a set of Mishnah. That's not what he did. He made them himself. He did it himself. He made it himself. Now, don't forget, books were scrolls on parchment. So what did he do? Gemara says he went out and he caught a deer. And after catching the deer, he would slaughter it. And he would skin the deer because it's the hides used for parchment. The meat of the deer he would give to the poor. He would go ahead and, process the hides into parchment. He would go ahead and write the books himself. And then he would take them, the scrolls themselves rather, and then he would teach them to the children. That's what he did. So the question is, why? Why do you have to put in so much work into it? Even if, let's say he had to write them. Okay, you buy hides, right? It's not like everybody, gets their own animal hides. You buy the animal hides, and you process it. Okay, but no, that wasn't enough. He had to catch them. He had to shech them. He had to take the meat and give it to the poor. And everything he had to do himself. Why? Why do you have to do everything himself? The answer is because Reb Chia understood that for these scrolls, we'll call them books, for these holy books, for these books of Torah, to make the proper imprint upon the children studying from it, the holier they were, the greater an influence and imprint they would have on those children, the greater effect it would have. So, when it comes to making a Sefer Torah, when whatever, it comes from animal hide, right? So when you slaughter the animal, you don't have to slaughter it with the intent of using these skins for a Sefer Torah. When it comes to the point of, after you have the hides and you're working out the hides, whatever that process of working out is, the ibud, the working out, that you have to do with the intention for the sanctity of a Sefer Torah. But earlier than that, you don't have to. Rebbe Chia started even earlier. He wanted to sanctify them at an earlier stage. He was going to sanctify them by catching the animal and slaughtering the animal himself. That meant that when he would be doing this, he would already be having in mind he's doing this for the purpose of the purpose of teaching these children Torah. And that would infuse these books with sanctity, with a sanctity that would help make that impression upon these children who would study that Torah. And the more that he did it, the more that he did to put the sanctity into those books, the more sanctity they would have. They didn't just have sanctity because, and again, that's, if you're talking about the Chumash, we have a Torah scroll. There was a point of time that it wasn't one big scroll, it was 5 scrolls. But Mishnah doesn't need that. But he still understood that if he was going to have the proper, the holy intentions while he's making these books, then he understands that now he's infusing sanctity into these books. And the more that he can infuse that sanctity, the greater and more powerful the sanctity of those books are. If he goes to the local bookstore and goes to the local merchant and he buys hides, right? Why did the merchant, skin the animal? To make money. He didn't go ahead and do it, to make them into Torah books. But when he already caught the animal and he skinned the animal, he was already thinking, I'm doing this for the purpose of using these for books of Torah. And with that kind of thought, he was already infusing sanctity into those books. And he knew that the more that he put in, the greater sanctity he would have. The ones that were at the Chumash would be sanctified because they'd be sanctified. But they did. But from a halachic perspective, from a halachic point, you don't need to have that kind of intent to sanctify it that early. But he understood that his intent, the earlier, the more that intent that he has to sanctify it, the more intent that he has to use it for a holy work, the more sanctity he's infusing it with. And the more sanctity that these these books have, the greater impression will make on the children. So you hear already from Rebbe Chia, we see this idea that the more you put into something, the more preparation you put into something, the more you'll get out of it. And that's what was happening with the Jewish people. By starting already, when they left Rephidim, before they even got to Sinai, they already were thinking and contemplating about receiving the Torah. That was the start of their preparation. And because then the more preparation they put in, the more they had out of the experience, which is a lesson to all of us. Sometimes it's hard to prepare, preparing for Shabbos, preparing for Shabbos up to the last minute, because we are so busy doing things, which is a preparation, clearly. Some people make sure before Shabbos that they can stop, all preparation is done. They can stop and think about, okay, now we're coming into Shabbos, coming into the holy day. There's talk about preparation for Yontif, these kinds of mental, emotional preparation. It's an important thing to try to do. And the more you can do it, the more that you put from yourself into it, the more thought, the more heart, the more emotion you put into it beforehand, the more you have from it. The preparation for a mitzvah makes a difference of how much we are able to experience and have from the mitzvah. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful evening.
This is you explain why